I'm Dr. Michael Berry. I'm a registered psychologist and the clinical director of HBR, and today our topic is effort. Now, I think it's an important thing because for me personally, almost none of the good things in my life would have happened without a lot of effort. And in the recovery field, we often talk about this concept of doing the work. And that's what I want to talk about today, this idea of doing the work. And the truth is that there is no easy, effortless recovery. There's no easy, effortless growth, really. If you're going to evolve as a person, you have to try your very hardest. And often when I'm working with someone who keeps relapsing, I'll put a simple question to them. How hard are you trying? Can you rate it as a percentage? Typically, they'll say something like 50%. It's kind of an old psychologist trick. It's a way to reassure that person that if they actually were to put in 100% effort, they're likely to be successful. And on the flip side, it's also a bit of a reality check because they're not likely to be successful if they're putting in anything less than 100% effort. And that's what I want to talk about today. And I want to start with the idea that effort can be both rewarding and it can be scary, especially in a recovery context. For instance, has it ever happened for you that you didn't put in effort with something out of fear of failing? Certainly, I've wrestled with that a lot of times in my life. For example, I remember that type of avoidance from my first year of university. I wanted to speak up in class, but I'd hold back from raising my hand to answer any of the questions because if I didn't try, there was no risk of failure. At least that's what I thought. There was no risk of messing up and embarrassing myself. And that's the tricky thing with effort. We often think it's only worth it when we know that we'll succeed, but that kind of defeats the whole purpose. Effort, real effort, happens when we face something challenging and put in the work to overcome it. And this is the approach that you have to take to therapy. It's the approach that you have to take to recovery, especially if you want to reap all of the benefits of change and personal growth. Now, I don't mean to sound cynical, but people are good at excuses. They'll often tell themselves, I'll make the changes after this date, or after I sort things out at work, or in my personal life. Basically they'll make the changes after some condition is met. But putting a bunch of conditions in front of the work in order to avoid that effort and the discomfort that goes along with it, it really isn't helpful. So here's some cold water. It is never the right time to do the work. There isn't some sort of perfect window of time or some sort of checklist that you need to actually accomplish before getting down to the work of therapy and recovery. These are just obstacles that you're throwing up in front of yourself. But the other way of putting it is it's always the right time to do the work. Once you accept that change and growth will always involve challenges, that's when you'll be able to actually move forward. And it's really not worth it to put roadblocks in front of yourself. The sooner you ditch the avoidance, the sooner you'll get better. So let's get really honest here. What excuses have you given yourself to avoid doing the work? What types of avoidance do you use now? Now, some people begin their recovery with a lot of enthusiasm. They come in and they'll sort of give me this really lovely speech on how they want to change and how they're ready to put in the work. And don't get me wrong, it's good to hear and it's definitely useful to bring a positive attitude into your recovery, but it's also important to distinguish between enthusiasm and effort. Enthusiasm can help you build motivation and motivation can help you put in the effortful work, but they're not the same thing. A person can feel enthusiastic while still kind of taking the avoidance route, talking the talk without walking the walk. This can be a conscious thing, it can be an unconscious thing, but either way, it's a sneaky way of trying to convince yourself and other people that you're putting in the work when actually you're really avoiding doing it. Now, for people like me who work with addiction a lot, it's not hard to spot when someone is or isn't doing the work. It's not hard to spot when they're doing the right things, not just saying the right things. So here's something crucial I'd like for you to bear in mind as you start to move through the next phases of your recovery. It's hard work. It can and should be challenging, and with challenge comes discomfort. I have another video where I'll talk a little bit more about discomfort, but for now, what I really want you to remember is that it's important to experience and accept the uncomfortable parts of your recovery. And it's through putting an effort that the uncomfortable ends up ultimately becoming comfortable. So here's another challenge to be honest with yourself. Does this all sound familiar to you? Have you ever said you're ready to change, but actually avoided going deep into the work that's involved in change? Let's talk about what effort looks like once you're in recovery or therapy. To be able to get down to the root of your problems, you have to start opening up. And in order to do this, you have to actually trust your coach or therapist. You have to trust your support system. You have to trust the people that you're working with. I get it. Opening up and airing your dirty laundry is a really vulnerable position to be in, but it's much easier to do when you choose to trust those who are actually there to help you. They're not perfect, but they don't have to be. They might get some things wrong, but they can still be trustworthy and well-intentioned people who can actually help you. I'd like to take a moment and talk about therapy and coaching specifically. And I really want to re-emphasize, you have to trust your coach or therapist quite deeply. These relationships are important. They're personal relationships, and it might take a bit of time to develop that deeper level of trust. And that's okay. It's just part of the process. It does require a leap of faith, though. Of course, it's okay to change coaches or therapists if the fit really isn't right. But if you've been to see 10 different professionals and there's always something wrong with every one of them, it's possible that the problem isn't actually with them. If you're going to get support, you will eventually have to let your guard down and trust someone. Another part of showing effort in your recovery is putting into practice what you learn in session in your actual life. Managing your feelings, for instance, and overcoming cravings are things that you'll have to do regularly on a day-to-day basis. Your effort basically doesn't start and stop when you enter and leave a session with your coach or counselor. It has to continue outside of the session. Putting action to words is the true proof that you are trying, and it's also the most immediate way that you'll be able to see yourself as being capable of recovery. Putting effort into your recovery also requires consistency. It's kind of like going to the gym. If you want to see results, you have to go on a regular basis and make sure that you're pushing yourself enough to create change. But there is a balance here. If you push yourself compulsively or thoughtlessly, if you overdo it, you risk hurting yourself. But if you push yourself too little, you won't see any growth. You have to strike the balance. And the same thing applies to recovery. Just like going to the gym, it'll be pretty taxing when you first start out, but the more you do, the more momentum you'll build and the easier it will ultimately get. You've also got to avoid getting discouraged when you don't see immediate results. Change, especially deeper psychological change and personal change, can be difficult to see at times. But by being consistent in your effort, the day will eventually come when you can look at yourself in hindsight and in retrospect and be able to identify things that you've changed through the hard work that you've done. Some ways to help you maintain your effort is to actually share your intentions with those around you. You can tell friends and family members about your decision to be abstinent, for instance, and the things that you'll be able to accomplish by doing this. That can help you stay accountable. When other people know about your goals, they can try to help. They can check in with you. They can ask how things are going. And I've had a lot of clients who actually avoid this. They don't want to be embarrassed if they have to tell others that they didn't end up meeting their goal. In a lot of cases, though, they've kind of counted themselves out before they've even gotten started. In doing the work, you have to put something on the line. You have to be willing to risk disappointment, frustration, and even embarrassment. And you have to be able to risk telling other people that you haven't fulfilled the goals that you have set for yourself, but that you're going to keep trying. Of course, having others keep you in check, while it can be useful, it shouldn't be your only source of motivation to put in effort. I'm a huge advocate of taking personal responsibility and taking personal accountability. I think these are key ingredients of recovery. I think these are key ingredients of living well in general. I'll talk about them some more in detail in a video that I'll do on personal responsibility. But for now, I want to say a way to keep yourself accountable is to make sure that you have clear, well-defined goals ahead of you that you can actually keep track of and check in on, as well as being honest when you're struggling or when you have a setback. The road to sobriety and abstinence isn't always a smooth one. You have to make an effort to be honest with yourself and know when to admit that you might need some extra help. I've had clients who didn't really want to admit that they were struggling. They didn't want to acknowledge it to me or perhaps to people in their personal lives. The reason was that they didn't want me or their loved ones to think that all their hard work was in vain. This really isn't a helpful mindset to have, as it can lead to self-isolation and can increase your degree of risk of relapse. And the goal isn't for you to be perfect and to never have a single craving again. It's about learning how to deal with your problems and learning how to handle setbacks. I really believe in the following rule for life. Don't say you're doing good if you're not doing good. Another way to facilitate your effort is to make sure you're spending it efficiently. Purposeful effort is a limited resource. It takes a lot of energy to change your life and change your lifestyle. So try to be mindful of how and where you're spending that energy. I've seen energy management mistakes that come out in a bunch of different kinds of ways. Maybe a person focuses on the wrong thing or tries to jump steps or take shortcuts in order to make their recovery go faster. Or very often I've seen people trying to take on too much at once. Try to figure out the most important places to put your energy and then prioritize them as you're making effort. Let me give you an example of putting your energy in the wrong place. Take John, a hypothetical recovering alcoholic who's struggling to make sobriety and abstinence work for him. He's been to therapy and been to coaching before, but he still seems to be stuck in that cycle of relapse. John thinks that the main cause of his alcohol difficulties is the availability of alcohol. And as long as he's not around alcohol, he won't have any problems. The assumption isn't wrong per se. It's good to create barriers between yourself and your drug of choice, especially in the early stage of recovery. But access is not the only factor in John's addiction. And John is going to see alcohol in restaurants, he's going to see alcohol in ads, potentially at parties, and so on. So in order to fully recover, John will have to confront the root emotional difficulties that led to the addiction in the first place. The way I like to put it is you can kind of change the scenery, but it doesn't mean that you've changed the person unless you do that deeper work. And the flip side of John's situation is the individual who tries to take on way too much all at once. They're trying to stay abstinent, advance their career, take on new hobbies, all these different kinds of things. They're trying to fill every minute of the day with something productive. This is not usually a recipe for success because it really isn't sustainable. I think mental health professionals can even fall into that trap at times, trying to help somebody revolutionize their whole lives rather than setting clear, definite goals. But to be successful, you really do need to determine and decide, where do I need to put my effort today? And then apply yourself wholeheartedly to that. Programs like HBR can offer you tools and strategies for where and how to apply your effort, but they won't amount to much if you don't give it 100%. That's true for you, for me, for everybody, with everything that really counts. So to sum up these last couple points, what I really want to say is You will have to trust. You'll have to trust other people to help you. You'll have to do that deeper work, but you will also have to offset that with making clear, specific goals for where to put your effort and then apply that effort. Give it 100% in order to actually make these changes and move your life forward. Thank you for your time today. We'll see you on the next one.